Screens! We look at them basically all day. Big screens, foldy screens, pocket-sized screens, foldy pocket-sized screens.
Wow, that's amazing.
The amount of time we spend per day on average looking at a screen, and this does not even include time spent for work and or school, is 4 hours and 47 minutes per day. In the US, the average is higher at 6 hours and 12 minutes of screen time per day. Whether it's streaming a show, surfing the web, or scrolling through social media. And nearly a quarter of Gen Z spends a not insignificant 9 to 12 hours a day looking at a screen. And in many cases, multiple screens at the same time, which I didn't actually know was a thing because I'm old and the rest of the world has changed because of these screens. It's hard to navigate our lives without them, particularly everyone's favorite pocket screen, the smartphone. Whether it's using Google Maps to drive to the grocery store, making plans with our friends over text, paying for parking, or buying a train ticket, modern society has arranged itself in such a way that living in it is nearly impossible without carrying around a screen at all times. And it's not just cell phones, gas station pumps.
Recording your iPhone screen can be useful. Here's how.
LED billboards, even the elevator at my office has a screen. Thanks. And why? Has humanity entered a new golden age of information? Have we become bound together as one, elevated by the soft glow of our all-knowing screens, infused with a collective will to solve all the world's problems? Or is it just so some rich assholes can make a few extra bucks? It's the second one. The answer is because of rich assholes. Unfortunately, for those of us who aren't billionaire tech CEOs, the real value of these devices doesn't come from what they give to us, but from what they take from us, our attention. Smartphones and social media have become a bajillion-dollar industry, but this is just the most recent version of a type of business that dates back to the early penny newspapers of the 1800s. A whole industry built on the idea that human attention itself is a scarce and valuable resource that can be extracted and sold for profit. This has come to be known as the attention economy. Though it has existed for nearly 200 years now, the attention economy has been supercharged in the information age.
You're trending, bro.
Touching nearly every part of our lives in ways that are closer and more personal than at any other point in human history. And with the rapid emergence of AI, we are entering a new, more intimate phase in our relationship with technology, one whose effects are only beginning to be understood. Before we dive in here, it's worth pointing out that we can get a lot of good from our screens. I have to seriously question my life choices if that wasn't true. And the cameras on these things are awesome. It's great having it around all the time, and they provide a good check on government overreach, which has been pretty important over the past year. And there is a lot of great content out there. So much content. Audio content, video content, long form, short form, an endless stream of content on top of content on top of content. Yes, there is a lot of garbage online. Clickbait, fake news, partisan echo chambers, and that all comes with its own set of problems. But what I'm worried about now in this video has more to do with the sheer magnitude of content that comes through our eyeballs and our earballs on a daily basis. The endless social media scrolls, the constant pings and notifications, that dense stack of open browser tabs, even the content we haven't looked at yet but still gnaws in the back of our minds, like the 8,000 unread emails in my inbox. What is this daily avalanche of content doing to our content processors? You know, our brains. What effect does it have on society? And if it's not improving our lives, then who is benefiting from all this? He asked rhetorically, but not really. I don't think we can overstate the significance of the audience that the current US president chose for his 2025 inauguration, particularly these guys in the good seats, sitting in front of his cabinet members. In addition to being 3 out of the 4 wealthiest people in the world, scratch that, 3 out of the 6 wealthiest people in the world? Sorry about that, Mark. Tough year, huh? These men also control the most visited website in the world and 4 out of the 5 top social media platforms. 5 out of 5, if you count Shou Zi Chew, the CEO of a company once accused of being a national intelligence threat, seen here, sitting next to our national intelligence director. This is what power looks like in the 21st century. A triforce, if you will, of money, political power, and attention, leaving the rest of us schlubs with nothing but a dinky wooden sword and a boomerang that maxes out at like 3 feet. In this video, I'm going to talk about attention, what it is biologically, how it's being exploited by tech billionaires, what the attention economy is doing to our brains individually, and the collective effect that all this screen time has on our society. And most importantly, what we need to do if we're ever gonna... What was I talking about? Human brains and the brains of our animal brethren are constantly being bombarded by a 360-degree assault of sensory information. Visual information like colors and movement from the environment, sounds, changing air pressure and temperatures, the rumblings in our bellies, the creaks in your knees and dull pain in your lower back, a constant reminder of human fragility and your own mortality, even the weight and sensation from the fabric of the clothes hanging on our bodies. In fact, every second, there is the equivalent of about 11 million bits of information being transmitted to our brains from our sense organs. And while the brain has tens of billions of neurons and tremendous parallel processing powers, our conscious minds can only handle about 10 to 50 bits of information a second. That's like maybe 5 words or a single simple thought like, catch the frisbee, or donut, or don't hit the pedestrian. There is a huge discrepancy between the amount of information coming into our brains and the 10 bits per second that our conscious minds can handle. And this is a good thing, an evolutionary feature, not a bug. Imagine being constantly aware of everything happening around you at all times. It would be insane. Our brains would be fried by the face-melting brutality of unfiltered reality. Instead, our brains mercifully filter out most of the sensory information coming in, allowing us to focus on what actually matters. This powerful mind filter is what we call attention. It's the cognitive ability to select and analyze specific information and ignore everything else. If the entirety of the information coming into our brains is like a crowded stage in a theatrical production, then our attention is the spotlight that focuses in on one particular character. From a survival and evolutionary perspective, this ability to focus attention, to ignore, is critical. It's what has allowed our species and many others to use our brains efficiently on important tasks like finding food, avoiding predators, getting your groove on, etc. One important feature of our attention is that it's also naturally drawn towards threats. In the game of evolution, it's often more advantageous to focus on something dangerous than to focus on something that makes you happy. This is called negativity bias, and it probably kept your great ancestors alive on more than one occasion. It's also the same reason we notice angry faces in a crowd before happy faces, and why we can't help but gawk at a car accident, no matter how horrifying. Negativity bias also plays a very specific role in the digital age, but I'll get to that later. So attention is a filter, our ability to ignore the non-essential. But it's limited in one critical way. While modern humans don't necessarily need to be on the lookout for murderous jaguars every day, the spotlight of our attention always has to be focused on something. And that something is not always under our control. Attention is a powerful evolutionary tool, designed to direct our brain's considerable resources towards important tasks that require immediate action. So naturally, it was only a matter of time before someone would try to make money off of it. In the 1830s, thanks to the invention of a new tricked-out steam-powered printing press, newspapers could be printed over 100 times faster and at a fraction of the cost of traditional papers. These new penny press papers were sold for one penny, and were marketed towards a wider working-class audience. There was just one teensy problem. Each of these papers cost more than 1 cent to produce. The cost of production was higher than the price paid by the readers. To fix this problem, Benjamin Day, publisher of The Sun, the world's first penny press paper, had a radical new idea. Instead of just selling newspapers to his readers, he would also sell his readers. He took a portion of the paper normally reserved for stories and instead sold it to advertisers. This wasn't the first time that ads appeared in newspapers, but it was the first time that they were fundamental to the business model. Of course, to make that extra ad space valuable, a lot of copies of The Sun had to be put in front of a lot of eyeballs. To keep the average reader engaged, The Sun leaned into the sensational right away, featuring stories of tragic death, lots of crime reporting, and sometimes complete fabrications. According to Tim Wu in his book, The Attention Merchants, this is what inevitably happens in a competition for attention. Content will naturally gravitate towards whatever is more likely to engage our basic instincts. Stories that shock us, or arouse us, or anger us, or terrify us. And surprise! As a business strategy, it works. 2 years after it began, The Sun sold over 19,000 copies a day, making it the most widely read paper in the world, over 4 times the circulation of the previous most popular paper. What Benjamin Day and The Sun pioneered was not just another way to make money, but a whole new relationship between product and consumer. Unlike traditional papers, readers of The Sun were not its primary customers. Advertisers were. And advertisers weren't just buying space on the page, they were buying, literally, the attention of the readers. For the first time in history, the consumers became the product. This was the birth of the attention economy, but print ads were just picking at the surface of what was possible. With the invention of the radio, attention merchants realized that they could skip the newsstand and reach people directly in their homes. Television came next. Now, instead of a single sponsor, shows were divided into segments and multiple sponsors could compete for airtime.
Hey, great coffee.
The home, once a space reserved for, interacting with your family members, was now fertile ground for advertisers to plant their seeds and harvest that sweet, sweet attention. The next major leap in ad evolution happened a few decades later with the home computer and the multiverse of delight and anguish that came with it, the internet.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.
It's really cool.
Now, consumers could be exposed to ads at any time of the day while engaged in a number of different activities. Work, entertainment, learning, deranged tirades, or chatting with friends.
It's very hip to be on the internet right now.
With each new technological innovation, the attention economy moved in lockstep, each time getting a bit closer and more personal to its primary resource: us. Now, I think it's important to understand that when I talk about attention as a resource, I'm being literal. It's not just a metaphor. Our attention has value. That's why the average cost of a 30-second commercial spot during the Super Bowl is $8 million. The more attention a person or brand has, the more likely people are to listen to them or buy their product. Attention is power. It's valuable and it's extracted in a way that's analogous to how physical resources like coal or precious metals are mined. Except instead of workers and heavy machinery, our attention is dislodged by content, collected by screens, and then sold to advertisers who are the actual customers in the attention economy. This is a good description of the classic business model of the attention market, which up until the internet hadn't really changed much since the early penny papers. Media companies make money by selling ad space. That's it. But this is a pretty basic garden hose approach to advertising. Just spraying a lot out there and hoping the right people get the message. Advertising to audiences and demographics, but not individual people. In the ideal world of advertising, every ad would be relevant to the viewer. But to reach that golden pinnacle of advertising, media companies had to figure out a way to get up close and personal with their audiences. Real close and real personal. In 1998, Google co-founder Larry Page and future Jeffrey Epstein house guest Sergey Brin gave a presentation to the World Wide Web Conference where they outlined their vision of a large-scale hypertextual web search engine. At the time, they believed that advertising-funded search engines would be inherently biased towards the advertisers and away from the needs of the consumers, and that it was crucial to have a competitive search engine that is transparent and in the academic realm. I just wish I knew which search engine they were talking about. Is it Bing? Yahoo? Ask Jeeves? Obviously, Google's idealist vision of ad-free search didn't last long. Shortly after the web conference, the dot-com bubble started to burst, and Google, along with a plethora of other internet startups, needed to make a profit. Fortunately for Google, the solution was waiting for them in their servers in the mountains of data that they had already been collecting. Google's breakthrough discovery not only caused their revenue to explode, but changed the course of the attention economy and basically like everything else. In the year 2000, Google started displaying paid ads alongside search results. At first, the ads were just based on keywords in the search, but over time, Google began incorporating some of that extra data that they had been collecting about their specific users to predict what they wanted, rather than just reacting to what they typed. Things like users' search and browsing history and profile information like age and location. In 2001, Google made $86 million in revenue. Not too shabby. In 2004, they made $3.2 billion. Turns out, being able to predict the future can be quite lucrative. Who would have guessed? What Google discovered was a whole new commodity, something attention adjacent, but possibly even more valuable. What Harvard Business School professor Shoshana Zuboff describes as behavioral surplus. Behavioral surplus is basically all the extra data that a user generates when they're online. Pages they visit, ads they click on, things they buy. But this was just the tip of the Zuckerberg, so to speak. Internet companies soon realized that there were a whole bunch of other ways to collect behavioral surplus, and this became the backbone of the new attention economy. This new business model is the subject of Shoshana Zuboff's book, The age of surveillance capitalism. She defines surveillance capitalism as a new economic order that claims human experience as free raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction, and sales. So instead of just selling a portion of your attention, internet companies now capture your entire experience. Everything you click on, everything you look at, that video of a dog riding a skateboard that you linger on a little bit while scrolling through YouTube shorts, it's all valuable insight into you, who you are, what you like, what inspires you, what terrifies you, what angers you. This digital raw material is gathered, stored, and then used to construct a detailed psychological profile of you. All the big internet companies do this, and they won't let you look at it. You could find a list of some of the data that they use, but they're not going to show you the profile that they've created of you. That's proprietary information. Even though it's our data, they own it now. And all this valuable data, these pieces of ourselves, are given away for free every time we open up a browser or look at our phone. Google may have been the first to stumble into the surveillance practice, but they would not be the last. In 2009, Facebook officially surpassed MySpace as the top social networking site. In that same year, they debuted the now ubiquitous like button, which, in addition to delivering little addictive hits of dopamine, was also a powerful generator of behavioral data. Like buttons also started appearing on websites outside of Facebook. These external like buttons just so happened to contain a tracking cookie that could track every website that the user visited, even if they weren't logged into Facebook, even if they didn't have a Facebook account. When Facebook was called out on this, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said it was a bug, certain cookies were tracking users in error, and that they would fix the glitch. The crazy thing is, there are so many examples of this kind of sneaky data gathering behavior that after reading about it for a while, it kind of becomes a blur. I mean, look how thick this book is. Look at all these examples. Look at that. Like how Gmail initially scanned all emails for keywords, even from non-Gmail users, or how Google Street View cars were caught capturing web searches and credit card payments from unencrypted Wi-Fi networks that they just happened to be scanning for as they were driving by. Facebook/Meta is still doing this kind of stuff too, years after this book was written. It seems like every time a new piece of technology comes out, you can be sure that surveillance-driven tech companies will find some novel way to extract more data from their customers. And in this case, anyone their customers are looking at. Sure, Meta took down the code a few days later, but this is a typical example of the cycle Zuboff describes in her book. Tech companies claim new personal data as their own, offer a half-assed apology when people get upset, and then tweak the code a bit and eventually bring it back as a feature after people have gotten used to the idea. So it may have been shut off for now, but you can be sure that facial recognition technology in smart glasses is not going away for long. It's easy for us to see a broken window and missing electronics and be like, yep, that's a crime, that's wrong. But when it's a few lines of code in one of a dozen files, it becomes harder to wrap your mind around. Sure, people get outraged when they discover that they're being tracked or monitored without their knowledge. But because this tracking behavior is essentially invisible to us, it's pretty easy to forget that it's happening. Eventually, the practice becomes normalized and we come to accept it as inevitable. But it's not. It is not inevitable. We are allowing this to happen. Facebook also has the distinction of being the first site to introduce a recommendation algorithm with their newsfeed. The concept of the personalized feed is probably the most visible consequence of the massive troves of data that we generate, and perhaps the defining characteristic of modern digital media. So I gotta bring it up. Today, Facebook's newsfeed algorithm can take in thousands of different signals to make predictions about what content a user is likely to engage with. Like how long you spend reading a particular post, how often you comment, who you interact with, and so on. Social media algorithms are constantly learning more about us and updating their design, all in service of the benevolent goal of crafting rich and valuable experiences for every girl and boy. And of course, I'm kidding. They just want to keep us on their site as long as possible so they could serve us more ads and gorge themselves on our juicy data. And with the invention of the iPhone in 2007, the whole world changed yet again. Now, people had a screen that they could carry with them and engage with everywhere they went and at any time of the day. For a lot of us, our smartphone is the first thing we look at when we wake up and the last thing we touch before going to sleep. Well, maybe not the last thing. And of course, phones make fantastic surveillance devices, constantly generating behavioral surplus from our GPS location, contact information, and a buttload of apps to gawk at and fiddle with. Just thumbing around, all thumbsy-wumsy. Okay, But so what, you say? Sure, we're constantly being surveilled and served up with targeted ads, but what's the big deal? This data that I generate, my swipes and clicks, it's not like it's top secret personal information, right? No one loves ads, but if they're more relevant, who knows? I might actually see an ad for a product that's useful to me. Isn't that a good thing? Plus, there's so much you could do with this thing. Tons of stuff to watch, apps to thumb around with. Surely we could overlook a little friendly espionage from time to time. If only it were that simple, my gentle viewers. If only it were that simple. For you see, our story doesn't end there. Once user behavior was thrown into the mix, attention merchants followed a progression that, in retrospect, should have been obvious. Extract, predict, control. Our behavior is not just being monitored, it's also being modified. In the 1940s and 50s, psychologist B.F. Skinner devised a series of experiments to study animal behavior. Specifically, he was interested in the absolute best way to train rats and pigeons to perform a series of otherwise pointless tasks by either reinforcing or discouraging certain behaviors. This is called operant conditioning. These operant conditioning chambers, or Skinner boxes as they came to be known, had a lever or buttons that pigeons could activate by pecking, lights or some kind of stimulus, and a dispenser that could administer a little treat. Skinner found that with the right schedule of rewards, he could train pigeons to do pretty much anything, from performing simple tasks like ringing a bell or turning around in a circle, to playing ping pong, to, and I'm not even kidding about this, guiding a missile. This was an actual project he worked on with the US government. Pigeon-guided missiles. Just as important as kamikaze pigeons was Skinner's discovery that the best way to encourage repeated behavior was through a system of immediate but variable rewards, meaning that not every instance of a behavior was rewarded. This is key. If a behavior was rewarded every single time, as soon as the rewards stop, the behavior stops. But if you truly want a pigeon to peck at a button over and over and over forever, and I mean like who doesn't, the best way to do it is to be prompt, but kind of random with how you dish out the treats. Why am I talking about pigeons in boxes? Well, imagine instead of a box, you have a phone, and instead of treats, you have likes and shares, and instead of a beak, you have thumbs, and I think you see where I'm going with this. In 2010, a simple mobile app in the tradition of B.F. Skinner was released called Instagram. The app encouraged people to post photos of themselves, or where they were, or what they were eating for breakfast by giving users an immediate reward in the form of a little heart icon every time one of their friends liked one of their pics. Now the thing is, when you post a photo on Instagram, you never know if it's going to get a lot of likes or not, so the rewards are variable. The interesting thing about variable rewards is not only do you get a rush of dopamine when the behavior is rewarded, whether it's with a like or pigeon food, but you also get a little hit of dopamine in anticipation of the behavior. This same principle is what makes endless scrolling on your phone so devastatingly effective. With each flick of the wrist comes another anticipatory rush of joy. Could this next TikTok change my life? Probably not. But maybe. And this little anticipatory hit of dopamine is enough to ensure that social media users will continue scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and posting and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and posting and liking. And it's also why video poker and slot machines are so highly addictive. It's not just the rewards, it's the anticipation of the rewards. The anticipation is its own reward for some reason. Humans, am I right? Okay, so that's operant conditioning. On the flip side, humans are also helplessly drawn towards content that makes us angry. This is where negativity bias comes back in. According to algotransparency.org, your video is more likely to get picked up by the YouTube algorithm if you use words like obliterates, shreds, or destroys in the title. A New York University study found that for every word of moral outrage you add to a tweet, your retweet rate will go up by 20% on average. Facebook is aware of this too. According to their own scientists, their algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. And if left unchecked, users will be fed more and more divisive content in an effort to gain their attention and increase the time spent on the platform. And like any learned behavior, clicking on negative content can turn into a habit. Indulging in a daily dose of moral outrage can become as routine as your morning cup of vodka Red Bull, coffee. And habits are not easy to break. What we pay attention to, what we choose to engage with, literally rewires our brains. brains. It's called neuroplasticity. We become what we look at. And a lot of what we look at today is selected by an algorithm that has been engineered to play our emotions like a trombone, all just to keep us looking at our screens and without much thought about what kind of effect it has on the rest of our life. So, how's that working out for us? Has the internet made us all smarter, happier, and more well-adjusted as promised? I talked about this a lot in my last video about collective narcissism and the rise of authoritarianism, so I'm not going to dwell too much on this now, but I will say that there is a large body of research on the detrimental effects of social media use on mental health and well-being. Like this, and 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 this. Heavy use of social media can also lead to dopamine deficiency, sleep deprivation, and desensitization to both negative and pleasurable stimulus from long periods of doom scrolling through negative content. So that's like the Surgeon General warning, obvious health impact of phones and social media. But now I want to highlight something that's much more pervasive. It's a side effect of the attention economy that's so common that it's become a social norm, and we don't even realize we're doing it half the time. Multitasking. Many of us multitask or attempt to consistently throughout the day, whether it's intentional or not. Now, I'm not talking about like washing dishes while listening to a podcast or walking while chewing bubble gum or like this. Was it there? Or like this. See what I can do? When I say multitasking, what I mean is performing or attempting to perform two cognitively demanding tasks at the same time, like responding to a text message in the middle of a real-life conversation, or checking your Instagram feed while writing an email, or scrolling TikTok while streaming Netflix, while writing your dissertation, while talking to your grandma. My favorite evening activity. I don't know if this is still standard practice, but last time I was looking for jobs, multitasking was a sought-after skill. And to this day, there seems to be this persistent belief that not only are humans capable of multitasking, but that with practice, we can excel at it. We cannot. First of all, humans can't multitask. Period. Computers with multiple processors can, but not people. Remember, our conscious minds can only handle about 10 or 50 bits per second. While it might seem like we're multitasking and being twice as productive by writing a work email while scanning news headlines, the reality is that we're just switching tasks. And there is a heavy cost to this. For starters, it takes some additional time for our brains to reorient themselves after we task switch, so we have to remember what we were writing, what we were going to do next, what we were talking about. It only feels like a seamless flow of activity because our brains sort of smooth over the wrinkles in our awareness. So the time you spend being distracted on your phone while you're supposed to be working is only a portion of the lost time. There's additional lost time due to switching costs that you're not even aware of. In a study conducted by Microsoft and their employees, they found that it took 25 minutes on average for a worker to get back to the task that they were doing after being distracted by an email. 10 minutes of that time was for checking and maybe responding to the email, but the other 10 to 15 minutes was just switching costs. Workers had to remember what they were doing and reorient themselves and click through open applications to find the right one, potentially getting distracted by other work in progress along the way. And how often are we dealing with these distractions? According to Gloria Mark, the typical knowledge worker spends around 10.5 minutes on any one project before switching to something else, either because they're being interrupted by something external, like an email notification, or because they interrupt themselves. Once the brain is used to distraction, it can become a habit like anything else. Not only are we losing time when we multitask, but our mental performance and memory also takes a hit. In one study, students that were interrupted by text messages during a test performed 20% worse on average than students who had their phones switched off. In the long run, multitasking can also negatively impact our creativity. Why? Because our brains are best at coming up with new ideas and novel solutions to problems when we're free from distractions. It's not enough to just read something on the internet or in a book. Your brain needs time to process what it's learned and absorbed. That's how we find new patterns, make new connections, have those little eureka light bulb moments. The funny or tragic part of multitasking is that the people who do it a lot, the heavy multitaskers, are actually worse at multitasking, but think that they're better at it. In this study, students who describe themselves as frequent multitaskers had high perceived multitasking ability, but performed worse on a test that required them to perform two cognitive tasks at the same time. Even though it has become a common and accepted practice, there's a ton of evidence that multitasking is an inefficient time suck that trains your thinking to be more shallow. You're not doing two things at once. You're spending more time to do two things worse. And it's not just individuals that suffer. A supermajority of people on this planet are now smartphone and social media users. Surveillance capitalism, the problems with the attention economy, that is a worldwide issue. How are we supposed to tackle huge, complicated societal issues like, I don't know, climate change, when we can't even focus on a single task for more than 10 minutes? Political participation by the people It's kind of a necessary thing for a functioning democracy. But why have a nuanced policy debate when slamming or obliterating or destroying your opponent is so much more satisfying and better for your views? One thing that we must do that I believe is within our power is we have to reclaim our attention. There are some interventions and techniques that seem to work, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think it's important that we first admit to ourselves and accept the fact that we are just really bad at this. We are bad at avoiding distractions and balancing our digital technology use with the rest of our lives. It is not our fault. It is not your fault. It is not a question of willpower or mind over matter or any of that other bullshit. We are frequently distracted, not because we are weak-willed, but because a handful of companies have spent billions of dollars and years of research to create technology that is designed to rewire our brains and modify our behavior. Like, who decided that was a good idea? Reclaiming our attention is something that we can do, but we cannot do it alone. We need outside help and a little good technology to fight the bad. Quick disclaimer, I am not a lifestyle expert, but I do feel confident enough to share a few things that have worked for me when it comes to eliminating digital distraction in my life. But first, if you're interested in an actual expert's opinion from a productivity perspective, Deep Work or Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport is a great place to start. Love me some Cal. I think my wife's kind of got the hots from too. That stud. However, if you're trying to eliminate distraction from your life for the sake of productivity, I would also recommend balancing that out with this book. It's a little off topic from what I'm talking about right now, but it's definitely tangentially related and super important. What else we got here? The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Essential reading for parents with kids who are worried about what phones are doing to their brains. Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again by Johann Hari. This was a major source of inspiration for this video. It's part deep dive, part personal memoir. I highly recommend it. And then of course there's this and this. The Attention Merchants is great for history nerds who are interested in how all this came to be. And The Age of Surveillance Capitalism is a gloomy but eye-opening deep dive into these tech companies. I've also been reading this book, The Power of Unwavering Focus by Dandapani. He's a former Hindu monk. Some of his explanations are a little less than scientific, but he does have some good techniques and recommendations for how to improve your focus during your day-to-day life. I mean, look at this guy. That is one focused dude. It's like peering into your soul. Personally, I wouldn't say that I've mastered the art of unwavering focus. There's still a lot of wavering going on. But here are a few tips and things that seem to be working for me. Number one, avoid multitasking. Embrace single tasking. One thing at a time, people. I am so sure you will be better off for it. And a good way to start is to eliminate as many distractions as you can. Close those extra browser tabs, for God's sake. In fact, close everything on your computer that you don't absolutely need to do whatever it is you're doing, especially if you spend all day working on a computer like I do. Any extra app that's running or browser tab that's open is just a distraction waiting to happen. Bookmark them if you need to come back later, but shut them down. Next up, cell phones. We gotta take them down a notch. Some people have opted for using old school flip phones or dumb phones with mixed results.
My thing was that there were just like certain smartphone features that feel really critical to my life.
Somehow I just shifted my screen time from my phone to my actual computer.
Maybe we should go back even further. I guarantee you if cell phones weighed 10 pounds each, we'd probably use them a whole lot less. My wife and I actually installed a landline phone recently. Remember these things? Partially so that we can use our own cell phones less, but also because we want to give our 6-year-old son the opportunity to talk to his friends and cousins, and so that we can delay buying him a cell phone as long as possible. That said, I'm probably not going to completely ditch this thing anytime soon. It's just too gosh darn useful and unfortunately necessary for living in modern society. I know there's a way to turn off notifications. I usually just leave my phone in another room or keep it on Do Not Disturb when I'm trying to focus. Even just keeping my phone slightly out of arm's reach significantly reduces the amount of times that I look at it. Boom. Attention problem solved. Another good way to break the phone habit, or any bad habit for that matter, is to add a little friction. Just make it a little harder to do the thing that you're trying not to do. I use a web and app blocker on my desktop computer and my phone, and I definitely don't look at distracting websites as much as I used to. I still do, but not as much. Yes, one can usually just enter a password to disable whatever web or app blocker they're using, but even this little bit of effort can be enough to break the habit. I still have this frequent periodic itch to check my phone, especially if I'm like like bored or waiting for something, but I found that if I could hold off for like 15 seconds, the urge usually goes away. If you could buy yourself some time with a web or app blocker, the slower, more rational part of your brain has a chance to kick in and be like, should I go on YouTube again for the 20th time today? And the answer is usually, no, you should probably not go on YouTube right now. Or ever. And you save yourself a minimum of like 15 to 20 minutes every time. And in these moments of weakness, when your mind is restless and the urge to distract yourself is strong, just remind yourself that boredom is not such a bad thing. So much of our digital consumption, so much of the strength of the attention economy is the result of our strong aversion to the slight discomfort of being bored. Lean into boredom. It can actually be good for us, especially for younger developing minds. Being bored can actually foster creativity and motivate positive behavioral change. In fact, I strongly recommend scheduling in some non-media consumption solo time during the day if possible. Leave your phone at home and go for a walk with only your thoughts to distract you. Seriously, they never shut the f up in there. Stop it. Shut up. I also realized, several years later than I should have, but whatever, that you can totally eliminate social media algorithms from your life if you want to, and still use platforms like YouTube and Facebook. There are multiple free browser plugins that do this. This is what my YouTube homepage looks like right now. I like Newsfeed Eradicator because it just replaces the entire page with a random inspirational quote. You can still browse your subscriptions or use the search bar, but all the recommended videos are gone, which means no more YouTube rabbit holes. It's such a huge time saver. Do I ever feel like I'm missing out? Occasionally, yes, but you could always turn off the plugin for a minute, find a video to watch, and then turn it back on. This is how I think we should be experiencing YouTube. And it prioritizes creators that we like. I mean, it's a win-win for everybody. Except for YouTube, but f them. The overarching theme for me, my main takeaway, is we need to be a lot more intentional with how we consume digital media. So far, we have allowed cell phones and social media to dictate the terms of our life. No more. Time for a switcheroo. My suggestion, figure out what you want to do in life first, and then bring in the technology you need to make that happen. Want to take a TikTok break after a morning work block? Go ahead, but maybe decide ahead of time how much time you want to spend on the platform. If you're gonna have a digital media break though, I would suggest not doing it first thing in the morning or just before bed. I find that if I can hold off looking at my phone until early afternoon, I'm far more productive in the morning. My hypothesis is that once you start consuming digital media, it kind of sets the threshold for what your brain finds stimulating for the rest of the day. It's harder to not look at your phone if you've already looked at your phone. You know what I mean? The typical recommendation is to avoid looking at screens at least an hour before bed, but to be honest, I break this rule all the time, and my sleep probably suffers as a result. So, schedule some social media time in your day if you want, but then get out of there quick, because these apps are designed to trick your monkey brain into using them as long as possible. And that's the real problem. It's not the underlying technology, it's not the hardware, it's the business model. As a society, we can't rely on individual interventions to fix a systemic problem. This goes all the way to the top. Literally, the richest people in the world and the business model that they created are the problem. They have wedged themselves into our lives under the pretense of human connection, and they are sucking us dry. And I think maybe we should do something about it, besides just making whiny yet compelling video content. So, how does one stop a business model? Well, as with many great journeys in life, history can often be a useful guide. This is not the first time that a widely used product has turned out to be bad for our health. And in some cases, we've been able to successfully regulate those products and mitigate their worst effects. For example,
oh my God. Chandler, give me that. No, you got your option.
in a 2024 Gallup poll, 11% of US adults reported that they had smoked at least one cigarette in the past week. But in 1954, it was 45%. Almost half of adults were cigarette smokers. It was intertwined with our culture. Old fogies like me will remember a time when restaurants still had smoking sections. People even smoked on airplanes. At one point, cigarettes were actually advertised as a weight loss solution. And they were not so subtly marketed directly towards children.
How's about taking a nap? I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it!
Smoking was everywhere. Smoking was cool.
Bond. James Bond.
And as a result, a lot of people died. which is not cool. Lung cancer deaths peaked in the US in the early 90s, but then dropped dramatically after years of successful national anti-smoking campaigns and government regulation. Eventually, public opinion changed. Instead of a signifier of how cool or masculine or feminine or healthy you were, people started seeing cigarettes as very harmful.
I've had it with you guys and your cancer and your emphysema and your heart disease. The bottom line is smoking is cool and you know it.
But only after a decades-long, focused national movement and a government that was responsive to the needs of its people. So, can social media be regulated like cigarettes? Maybe. One idea I came across was to add warning labels to social media apps like packs of cigarettes. Honestly, I'm not sure how effective that would be, but at the very least, there's gotta be some way to regulate social media algorithms. Everyone knows they're toxic and addictive, and no one has any clue how they work. At the very least, they probably shouldn't prioritize rage bait and negativity bias, right? I mean, like, what possible societal good does that have? I would love to see algorithms that are fully transparent, that gives the users some level of control over what kind of content they want to see. Algorithms that allow the platforms to operate and make money, but that work within society's best interests. I don't think that's too much to ask for. And you can do this without infringing on free speech. You don't have to ban any content. Maybe just don't elevate the worst shit. Another idea would be to encourage or force social media companies to change from a free service to a subscription model. Yes, we'd have to pay a monthly fee, but platforms wouldn't be as reliant on ad revenue, and in theory, there would be less motivation to spy on us. In theory. Rather than just trying to keep us on the platforms as long as possible, social media companies might be more inclined to just, I don't know, make a better product. Wouldn't that be nice? Or social media could be treated like a utility and owned by the public. Like sewers! Who doesn't love a good sewer? Sewers are an essential public service, and one could argue that to a degree, so is social media. The only difference being that unlike social media, sewers are designed to remove toxic waste, rather than to deliver it to us. Separating and treating wastewater was rightly recognized as a necessity to public health and something that was too important to be left to unpredictable market forces. A source of clean, accurate information should be considered just as important. Right now, we're living in the informational equivalent of cholera outbreaks and people dumping feces on the streets. I know that it sounds gross, but that's what people used to do. That is what we're doing now to our brains. Of course, the government would probably do a terrible job of managing social media, so it could just be funded by the government but run independently, like the BBC. People like the BBC, right? Here's the thing though. Any progress, any major change to a business model that has come to dominate our society is going to run up against one particular gigantic obstacle. The green elephant in the room, if you will. Capitalism, or more specifically, the principle of economic growth. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, God, I love going back to the Industrial Revolution, society has been organized around the idea that every year, the economy and every company in it should get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. If you're not selling more, if you're not innovating, if you're not breaking into new markets, then you're failing. Economic growth is the central organizing principle of our society. It's bigger than all the world's billionaires combined. From this perspective, companies like Google and Facebook have no choice but to harvest more and more of our attention and find new ways of making money from our personal data. If they don't do it, somebody else will, and then they lose. So this is going to be a hard issue to get around. I'm not advocating for the complete overthrow and restructuring of our economy. I actually think capitalism is fine. In moderation. We just need to move away from this concept of growth for the sake of growth and embrace something that's, I don't know, a bit more sustainable. Maybe it's as simple as finally retiring the idea that a business's only social responsibility is to increase profit for their shareholders. That should be like third on the list. At most. If we are ever going to solve big problems like fixing our mental health crisis or restoring our democracy or fighting climate change, we are going to have to figure out how to work and focus together as a society. We are not doing that right now. We need accurate information, a shared reality, empathy for people we sometimes disagree with, and sustained attention. It's hard to imagine any sort of progress without these things. Hi, Ryan from the future here. When I first started researching this video back in 2024, I didn't want to mention AI at all. At the time, large language models like ChatGPT were relatively new, and they didn't really affect the attention economy that much, other than just like another app that people could use on their devices. That is no longer true. In terms of the traditional attention economy that I've been talking about, the effects are already pretty obvious. For starters, the sheer volume of AI-generated slop on social media is staggering. One study that looked at thousands of videos on TikTok found that when they set up a new account, 59% of the videos in their feed were AI generated. To their credit, TikTok has already found and labeled over 1.3 billion AI generated videos on their platform, so they're aware of it at least. I was on YouTube looking for a John Wayne clip from an old movie that I can use in this video, and I came across this gem of a YouTube channel. It's got 59 videos, all of them made within the past 6 months, all of them clearly written by AI, using AI generated photos and narrated by a shitty AI avatar. I think even the comments might be AI generated, or at least a lot of them. After I watched the first video, I scrolled down to see if there were any scathing reviews like, oh, that's clearly AI slop, but they were suspiciously overwhelmingly positive. And the stories are all fake. If you actually read the channel description, there's a line here that says, "The stories presented here are original fictional narratives and dramatic interpretations inspired by the Duke's persona, life, and historical era," but you would never get that from just watching the videos. They're presented as fact. On the one hand, this channel might seem mostly harmless, but they're clearly exploiting conservative nostalgia and promoting this stereotypical masculine view of history where men were men. Ugh. Okay, so this is just one example, but how many channels are there like this on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram? And what's the effect? One study that looked at the impact of AI text generation tools on online discussions found that while AI tools increase engagement and volume of content, they decrease the perceived quality and authenticity of online discussions. In other words, quantity is going up, quality is going down, we're going to become more irritable and polarized than we already are, and overall screen time is probably going to increase too because AI can laser etch content to your specific niche interests, particularly if your specific niche interest has to do with animals in unusual or extreme scenarios. It's not hard to find content tailored to that specific interest. Okay, but that's just generated content on existing platforms delivered by traditional algorithms. But what about the chatbots themselves? ChatGPT, Claude, Character AI, these are new platforms controlled by relatively new companies. When it rolled out in November of 2022, ChatGPT set the record for the fastest growing consumer application in history, easily beating out the previous record holder, TikTok. Nearly half of US adults and the majority of teens are now using AI chatbots, mostly for information or help with schoolwork or writing an email, but sometimes for advice or emotional support. But I can't help but think about the negative mental health correlation with cell phone adoption and get a little bit concerned. There are already incidences of kids taking their own lives with the help of AI chatbots, and we are in the midst of a loneliness epidemic driven at least partially by technology. AI chatbots, which are very effective at praising and validating everything you say, probably seem like a welcoming refuge for a lonely person. But are kind words enough to cure loneliness? Is this gonna be a good thing in the long run for mental health? Like I said, too early to tell. But knowing what I know about social media, I'm gonna say probably not. A University of California psychologist recently coined the term AI psychosis to describe what happens when an AI chatbot breaks down a person's sense of reality. So we're already discovering new categories of mental health problems as a direct result of AI. Again, I'm not criticizing the underlying technology. I think there are plenty of legitimate uses for AI, particularly when it comes to coding. But the rapid adoption, the insane amount of money being invested, and the specter of another potential mental health crisis in the making, it just sounds like the same story of the internet and social media all over again. So how is AI going to affect the attention economy overall? Well, we're definitely going to see a shift. Maybe for the better, but probably for the worse. One possible benefit, as AI starts making more suggestions and even purchasing decisions on our behalf, there might be less incentive for companies to try to capture human attention and instead spend their marketing dollars on capturing AI's attention. This sounds weird, but it's already happening. Why bother monopolizing our time with an endless scroll when our money is already being quietly siphoned away by AI agents? I guess this is kind of a pro and a con. The flip side, of course, is that our AI friends who already have a surprising level of understanding of human psychology are going to have more and more of an incentive to push products on us. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, who once described showing ads along with AI as uniquely unsettling, is now showing ads along with AI. Gee, where have I heard this story before? Now, according to OpenAI, while the ads they show you are based on your conversations, the output of the chatbot itself is not influenced by advertiser money. But we are very clearly in an AI bubble. OpenAI, the creators of the fastest growing consumer application in human history, have yet to make a profit. And they're gonna go public soon. What happens when that bubble pops and angry investors want to see a return on the billions of dollars they've invested? What if there's a massive sell-off? What does a company like OpenAI do when they are backed into a financial corner? A company that, like Google back in the early 2000s, already has massive troves of data on all of their users. Combine that with the entirety of human knowledge and the equivalent of the computational power of the entire world in 2025, and I'll bet you could sell a few extra cases of Crest 3D white strips. This paper from 2025 suggests that what we are seeing is the evolution of the attention economy to the intimacy economy, where our trust and relationship with AI chatbots is the new commodity to be leveraged and exploited. To which I say, f***. For centuries, power was centralized in institutions: the state, churches, schools, factories. Today, power is dispersed. It permeates every aspect of our lives. It's fueled by the data generated by our phones when we're riding the train to work, and its influence is wielded when we're scrolling through social media at lunch. This new kind of power doesn't demand conformity. It doesn't care who or what you are as long as you're paying attention. And the more attention you give to something, the more power it has over you. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. Our society may look completely different than it did 100 years ago, but the people with the power are exactly the same. Rich assholes. And maybe there's a compromise we can make here. A certain amount of monetizable attention for a certain amount of information and entertainment. After all, we've had a similar arrangement with attention merchants for almost 200 years, starting with the penny press. I mean, commercials aren't always terrible, and if a few ads is the price we pay for quality entertainment, I can live with that. It's the deception and surveillance and control part that really tease me off. Our brains are rotting and our bodily autonomy is being taken away from us so that Meta's stock price can go up and Mark Zuckerberg can buy more cool and super masculine t-shirts. We've entered into a new agreement with the modern attention economy without being fully aware of the terms. Oftentimes, literally. I mean, no one reads this and that's the point. We don't know what we're really giving away, and we're being deceived about the true nature of our devices and the supposedly free services that we use. How this is going to change and evolve in the age of AI? Well, we're only just beginning to see some of the effects. But for all the power that they have, the tech billionaires and the attention vultures that rely on their platforms for sustenance are still vulnerable in one fundamental way. We can always choose to look away. As psychologist William James observed, we must reflect that when we reach the end of our days, our life experience will equal what we have paid attention to, whether by choice or default. And right now, I choose to look at that lake. Thanks for watching. Now, go take a walk or something. Don't even pay attention to those other videos. You don't need to watch them. Trust me. You can subscribe if you want. That's pretty harmless. Or go check out my Patreon if you want to support this channel. Thanks.